Hi, welcome to Polyphonic Press. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
I'm John Van Dyke.
And today we're going to be answering your questions. Here we go. Alright, so recently we reached 1,000 subscribers and we asked you guys to ask your questions in the comments. Unfortunately, we didn't get to it last week because we had some technical issues, but we're getting to it this week and we're going to be answering your questions. And if you didn't get your questions in on time, I'm sorry, but we're filming this and we're uploading it. So maybe next time we'll answer your questions. But for now, we're going to answer all the questions that were in the comments at the time of shooting this video. So first of all, we want to thank you for getting us to 1,000 subscribers. If it wasn't clear in the last video, we want to just say thank you very much. And our Polyphonic Press is continuing to grow, and it seems to be growing exponentially. So I think it took 3 years to get to 500 and less than a year to get to 1,000. So we seem to be doubling up every year. So hopefully that continues. So without further ado, let's get to the questions. So Trish Mullins asked, congratulations, how did you guys meet and when did you start getting into music?
She asked congratulations.
She
No,
says congratulations. Yeah. Yeah, when we met in third grade.
Something like that. Well,
and how... I mean, I met you. I remember meeting you in second grade, but we didn't start hanging out until third grade.
Yeah.
And I don't remember how we started hanging out.
I think we just started mostly telling jokes. That's how I seem to start hanging out with everybody.
Is that really how it happened?
Yeah, we just started like conversing with like a similar sense of humor going back and forth, and then we started comparing music collections, and I got you into Tom Petty.
Yes, that's right. So yeah, that's how we met in third grade. We've been friends ever since, and you know, yeah, that's basically how we met. We sort of bonded over our mutual love of cars and music, pretty much. And she also asked, when did you start getting into music? I remember being into music from a really early age.
Me too, yeah.
I think the first artist that I was really attached to, probably when I was like 3 or 4 years old, was probably Elvis Presley. I remember watching Viva Las Vegas over and over and over again. And,
that's funny.
And I remember also wearing out, or just listening to Tom Cochrane. Life is a Highway, whatever album.
I remember that
Highway
song coming out. Yeah, that was a big song. Yeah, I remember that.
I remember listening to that whole album a lot. It's a pretty good album.
That song's pretty damn good.
And so yeah, so that's how I started getting into music. I think, as far as like my favorite band, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, as far as getting into them, it was John actually who was into them first, and he inevitably, when we started hanging out, he asked me, do you know Tom Petty? And I said, yeah, I think my dad has a couple of his CDs.
CDs or tapes.
And so I went home, and the two CDs that he had were Into the Great Wide Open and Wildflowers, and I listened to them both, and I like them. And he said, well, if you like those, you'll probably like Damn the Torpedoes. So he got out his old tape collection from when he was like in his late teens, early 20s. And a lot of stuff from the late 70s were there, like a lot of new wave stuff like Nick Lowe.
That's some good stuff.
The Boomtown Rats.
That's some good stuff.
Yeah. Elvis Costello, early Elvis Costello. So a lot of that stuff was in there, and among it was Damn the Torpedoes.
Elvis Costello.
Yeah. And I remember taking the tape into my room with my Walkman and listening to Refugee was the first song, and it just kind of hit me in the gut, and that's when I was hooked, when I heard Refugee for the first time. Oh. So yeah, basically John and my dad were the biggest reasons that I got into music. What about you?
The first band I was ever obsessed with, and I was about 3 years old as well, was actually NRBQ. And that's pretty damn obscure for something about the size of a garbage can, but Yeah, the NRB. I actually still have an old poster that my uncle got from when the NRBQ around 1989 were playing the El Macombo, and he pulled this poster down off. I guess it was a post or a wall or something like that, and I still have it. It's a little beat up, but it's pulled off the wall. Really cool. But when I first got into Tom Petty, when my dad was sick in the hospital, we became really good friends with one of his nurses. This is down in Toronto at the Princess Margaret Hospital. And she and her husband would occasionally drive us back up and down. And I remember heading down the 401. And they were listening to, at first it was, the Traveling Wilburys. And I had remembered hearing Traveling Wilburys, and my dad had the record of Traveling Wilburys. And we're listening to this. I'm like... So I started asking questions because I wanted to know more about this band that I was familiar with, that I'd heard on the radio. And I was, and then they started picking out the 5 members. And of course, Tom Petty, George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Jeff Lynne, and Roy Orbison. Yeah. So I became fans of each of their individual stuff too, but especially Tom Petty, because the next one they played when we're heading down the road, and this is a perfect album to play when you're heading down a highway, is Into the Great Wide Open.
Yeah,
it's a travel fast kind of record.
Yeah. So some great stuff on there. So that's how we got into music.
That was around 1990. Actually, that was the day we went up in the CN Tower. And I haven't been up there since. Oh. But that was in 1992.
There you go.
So, Chipmunk Gorilla.
Yeah. Cool. I like that name, by the way.
That's a pretty good name, yeah. Should I do it in Chipmunk? No, never mind. He asks, are you guys musicians as also?
Yes.
Yes, actually.
We're both guitar players. We had a band in high school.
That went under a couple different names.
But yeah, we still get together occasionally and play guitar. We're both, like you said, we're both guitar players, just like everybody else.
We know a lot of other musicians too. Yeah. There seems to be a pretty good scene growing around here for musicians we know, and
and we've also started getting into working with a local concert promoter. So we've been doing some work with him as well, and. Aside from that, we've been doing this. But basically, our lives revolve around music. Just listening to it, playing it, putting on shows, talking about music on video. Yeah, we
always listen
pretty
to
much
music when we get home.
All consumed with music. But yes, we are musicians as well.
I also attend car shows. But that's my other vice.
Yeah. Alex Schmidt asks, how much do you like an album before you buy a physical copy? Does the album have to be good, great, or can the album just be okay or average? I would, it's hard to. Sometimes I'll go into a record store and buy an album knowing nothing about it. Yeah. Because I think the cover might look cool.
I don't do that. I often look at the cover and go, that's a great cover, but I know nothing about the musician, and I only have so much money, and I'm not going to... I'd rather get this one over here. Yeah. And sometimes I will overlook an album that I do want, but I'll buy a different one because I know it's actually physically a better album. Right. When I'm more financially capable of doing other things, then I'll pick up other ones and go, there's some good stuff off that one. I might as well get the whole album. Yeah. And sit and listen to it properly.
But I think for me, I have to at least like a few songs off of the album.
Oh yeah. If it's a shitty album, we're not gonna buy.
Yeah. If I don't necessarily have to hear the whole album to know that I want to buy it. Sometimes I do. It really depends on the artist and depends on the. If there are a few songs that I like on the album, I'll go out and buy it. But I don't have to hear the whole album to want to buy the album.
There's a few artists out there where I kind of feel like a bit of a completist and I must have their whole discography. Yeah. But that doesn't happen to all bands and whatnot. Most of them I will just pick out the ones that I'm particularly interested in. There's a lot of bands out there that I just happen to really love their whole output. But there are some other ones that I don't know, it's weird. You connect with them on a certain level and you just feel like in order to sort of piece it all together, you kind of need the whole set. Yeah. And Yeah, that's the way I am with like the Keys and Jack White and Tom Petty and stuff like that. So, Jeff Emerson asks, what are the worst rock bands and or rock albums you've ever listened to? Most underrated bands. Oh, it's the second part of the question. What are the most underrated bands that we've listened to? I'll have fun with that one.
Yeah.
And is there anything that you regret doing?
Okay. What's the worst rock bands or rock albums you've ever listened to?
Well, we didn't sit and listen to them long, but there's some bands out there that, let's just say they aren't our cup of tea.
Yeah. I mean, the typical answer is like Nickelback and those, but that's like
it's become so old.
That's kind of a cliche to say.
It is kind of a cliche.
We don't like Nickelback.
And yeah,
but it's true. I don't particularly care. Limp Bizkit. Don't really like.
To be fair, Nickelback had one good song I remember that came out.
Yeah.
Like years ago, and it was actually about domestic violence, and it was actually there was something. It was. I don't really listen to it very much because technically it's Nickelback, and I just don't want to associate. But there was this one good song that they put out, and it was like a little over 10 years ago, and then they found. Oh, they put out other songs, and they found this other formula, and they decided to keep repeating it, and it's getting old.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And the so most underrated bands. What are the most underrated? Well, NRBQ, I think.
Yeah, the NRBQ are pretty underrated.
Not many people.
They've got a cult following.
Yeah,
but most people have never heard of them.
Actually, I read Penn Jillette's book.
Oh yeah. You find references to them in the funniest
apparently
places.
He used to hang out with their drummer, one of their drummers.
Would it be Tom Ardolino?
I think so.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So yeah, they've got fans among all like music people know them. I know Keith Richards is a big fan of them. There are a lot of underrated bands out there. I think bands that have big hits. Some of their other stuff tends to get overlooked.
Yes, one-hit wonders.
Yeah.
There are some ones that, honestly, that's their best song, and nothing else is really worth getting into.
Yeah.
But there's other ones that you scratch below the surface, and there's just so much.
Yeah. Well, I think a good example of that is Nick Lowe. I mean, he's pretty big in England, but in North America, really the only song that people know of Nick Lowe is "Cruel to Be Kind." But he has so many other great songs. His first two albums, I think, are his best work. Jesus of Cool and Labor of Lust. Those are, I think, his best stuff. Basically Rockpile.
And the stuff he did with Rockpile. That's another good.
There's some...
Which included Dave Edmunds.
Yeah.
Who's another one who's the only song anybody has ever heard of him is I Hear You Knockin'.
Yeah. But he's got so many other great songs. Girls Talk, I Knew the Bride When She Used to Rock and Roll is a pretty funny song, and it's a good song too. Mostly it's bands that I think are one-hit wonders, but they also have this long career because they're maybe popular in another country or something like that. So I think those bands tend to be underrated and overlooked quite a bit. Bands that maybe people in the States don't know that are Canadian, maybe Sloan, are pretty big in Canada.
They're pretty big here. They got lots of hits in Canada, but in the States they still play.
They're doing okay in the States, but they're not as big as they are here.
Yep.
And other thing, is there anything you regret doing?
I wasn't finished.
Oh,
with
sorry.
sorry. But anyway, some underrated bands that I'm really interested in. Let's see here. There's the Music Machine. I'm really into like the psychedelic era and the garage rock and stuff like that. Well, they were sort of a garage-y psychedelic band I think they were from LA or something like that.
Yeah.
And they had one big song, Talk Talk, which has been covered by Alice Cooper and whatnot. But there's just the way he writes songs. It's just so... intricate yet, I don't know, they just got this, they're really catchy too, and everything, but they sound like this proto-punk sort of going. And there's who else? Yeah, well, we mentioned NRBQ. David Lindley.
Oh yeah,
he's one of these guitar players that you just he's in. He plays on all sorts of stuff. It's funny. You'll see him turn up from time to time in like album.
Yeah,
like,
I know
credits.
he did a lot of stuff with Warren Zevon.
Yeah.
And Jackson Brown.
Well, if you ever look for his band El Rey OX, there's some incredible stuff on there.
Yeah.
Like he'll do covers and he'll do originals, and all of it's pretty. It's unusual, but it's really good.
Yeah,
it's really good stuff.
Yeah, he's pretty cool. So, is there anything that you regret doing? I think the only thing that I regret is not starting Polyphonic Press sooner. Honestly, if I had wanted to do something like this for a long time. I just never really had the motivation to do it. And I think if I had started it sooner, it would have been something to do. I don't know. I think I would have liked to have been in the era of YouTube where it was more of a sense of community, like around 2006, 2007. It would have been cool to get to know some of the people who were around at that time. But it just never really occurred to me to make videos. It just never... That's really the only thing that I regret. I regret not doing this sooner. But really, I am happy. But, I mean, it's better to do it later than never.
I think we're doing all right.
I think we're doing all right.
We got
my life, I mean, there are things that I wish I had done differently, but I don't think I have. That's really the only regret that I have, is not starting this sooner.
I was kind of wondering about that question. Was like, what does he mean, like in relation to what we do here, or in life in general?
I think it was maybe life in general.
Maybe life in general. Well, we won't go into like relationships or things like that, because any real regrets other than that? I don't know. I'm a pretty cautious person, so there's not a lot of things. Maybe my only regret would be being too cautious in certain in certain opportunities. Maybe possible I've missed things. There's no way to tell.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
That's true. But yeah, overall, I think we're pretty happy. Cobal asks, what have you guys got planned for the future of the channel? I'm really enjoying the videos. Keep up the good work. Thank you. We're pretty much doing the same. No real plans to change anything.
No. If anything changes, it'll be pretty much organic. We'll just kind of go with what we feel we should do when the time comes. So
I mean, people seem to like the dynamic between me and John and doing the music discussion videos. I'm really happy doing the one thing that I'm really happy the change is doing only one new album review a week, because it was starting to get to the point where I wasn't giving the album enough time and enough listens to actually get a full appreciation for the album. So I think limiting myself to only one album review per week and listening to it over and over and over, whereas before I would just kind of listen to it once or twice and just not really grasp the full sense of the album.
So that's what's taking you so well with Spanish Gold. I keep badgering him about this one album.
So that's one thing that I'm happy about. And the classic albums, I think, the classic album reviews are a lot of fun to do. I may be thinking about doing a rotating thing on Fridays, where I do a classic album review and maybe something else, but I don't know what. So if you have any suggestions, leave those in the comments, because if you've got ideas for maybe something you'd like to see on the channel, I'm always open to suggestions for that. but yeah, as far as major changes to the channel, I think we're doing okay right now with what we're doing.
Viral Rack says, congrats, Jeremy and Jon. Jeremy, you know how happy I am to see you continue to succeed. You're still one of my favorite music reviewers out there, and I definitely think you're growing in the best way. What you're adding to the channel all makes sense, and you're on a great step to bigger and better places. That's pretty glowing.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
And his question is, my question would be, what are both of your top 5 albums of the year so far? What things have you kept going back to for more from 2014? This has been a good year for releases.
Well, even though I haven't reviewed it yet, I do like the new Spanish Gold, or the first Spanish Gold album.
Yeah, the first Spanish.
It's really good. It's a really good garage rock.
That is my favorite album this year so far.
It's a really good garage rock album. I really like the new Beck album. Is really great. The new Jack White is really fantastic as well. That's one I keep going back to. I
haven't heard the whole thing yet, and I want to get that one. I need to pick it up.
I kind of keep going back to the Beck album specifically. I think it's one of his best albums. It's more acoustic, more kind of. It's a little more mellow than the stuff that he's put out in recent years.
Than even Mellow Gold?
Well, yeah. Yeah, those are some of the albums that I really like. I think I'm looking forward to the new Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers album. The one song that I really that came out, the one song that came out from that album is really pretty amazing. It's sort of a dirty, grungy sort of rock song, something they haven't really done in a long time. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm one album that I really, really like, and I think this is probably my favorite album of the year so far, is Rich Robinson's new album, The Ceaseless Sight. This is his third solo album. Rich Robinson is the guitar player from the Black Crowes, but Chris Robinson put out a solo album too. It's pretty good, but I really like Rich Robinson's new album. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, that's probably the one album. That's probably my favorite album of the year so far. It's Rich Robinson's The Ceaseless Sight.
I need to listen to that one too.
Yes, you do.
And even though the album, and you were saying how you had sort of given it a little bit of a harsh review, but it still comes out to be pretty good. He's continuing on with that indie Motown thing that he's kind of been doing lately, but it's the Black Keys. The new album, it's actually pretty decent.
Yeah.
It's definitely a departure than what they normally do, and who knows what they'll be doing in the future. They may change again, or they may put out another 2-piece knockout. Who knows? Anyway, I'll be listening to whatever they do. But yeah, that one's also on our list. And Spanish Gold. That's my favorite album this year. I was talking to Zeus last year, and they said that they may be putting out one this year too. So I'm anticipating. I haven't heard anything yet, but it may be coming out, and I would really like to hear that one too. So yeah, those are the ones that we're looking forward to. Oh, Big Ideas 3 asked, why don't you give a rating on the classic videos? Should we assume all are 9 or 10? Does that mean you will never do a classic review of an album you're not that fond of? So I think I sort of explained it on Twitter, but I don't think I quite got the idea through on video. Basically, when I do the classic album reviews, they're not so much critical reviews as more of an overview, as like a historical artifact in the music world. So basically, I'm more or less looking at the history of classic albums. I use the term album review very loosely with those. They're more of overviews of my personal favorite albums. So yeah, basically they're all 9 and 10s. Well, I think a review can still be a review without being critical.
Yeah. It's less of a critical analysis of the album and more of an overview of the historical significance of the album.
And a lot of these classic albums are classics for a reason.
Yeah,
and we're very open to different genres and whatnot, and there's a general consensus on most of these, which would become a classic, and very rarely does a piece of crud actually become a classic. I'm not saying there weren't pieces of crud released at the time, but not many of them were considered classics. They're just considered old, cruddy records.
Exactly. So yeah, that's basically how the classic album reviews work. They're more, that's why I don't give them scores. I don't think, if they were new albums, if I were reviewing new albums, I give them a score. But I mean, these are albums that have been around for a long time, so there's not really a point in giving them a score or anything like that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And another thing is sometimes even if an album, it hasn't necessarily been called a classic, but you may want to expose some light onto it because it maybe should be a classic.
Yeah, that's another thing too. So it's more or less sharing my favorite album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no negative reviews.
Yeah.
Don Joe says, "Congrats, guys. My challenge is this. Defend an album artist that is generally accepted as a bad album. Example, I truly love Metallica's Saint Anger, and I know very few people who do. I love defending it. This would fall under very underappreciated favorites."
Okay. All right. Huey Lewis and the News sports. It gets made fun of a lot in the cool people music guys.
I'm going to throw the useless term out there again. Hipsters.
Yeah. But people who don't know the historical significance of Huey Lewis and the News, basically, on Elvis Costello's first album, the band on that album was the News.
I didn't know that.
Pretty much, yeah. And Huey Lewis, for a long time, was a harmonica player. And if you listen to, we mentioned it before, Nick Lowe. If you listen to Nick Lowe's Labor of Lust, the song Born Fighter, the harmonica on that song was played by Huey Lewis. And, I mean, he's got... His music it's good. I mean, I Want a New Drug, that's a good song. He's got some great... It's Hip to Be Square, from the iconic scene in American Psycho. I have a hard time not liking that music. And I know it's cheesy, and I know it's not cool.
There's a little bit of a camp factor to it, but it's actually not that cheesy.
No, yeah.
It's very... I don't know. It's somewhere in between what Bruce Springsteen was doing at the time and things that were a little bit more towards...
Yeah, it's a little
not quite as far as like new wave or something like that.
It's a little more R&B than Bruce Springsteen, but
exactly.
Definitely, yeah. So yeah, that would be one artist that I like that not many other people or the cool kids don't like is Huey Lewis and the News. What about you?
What about me? Oh, geez. Generally, oh man, I don't know. I generally don't pay attention too much to what other people generally think of an album. If I think an album is good, I think an album is good. But I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that I do like that a lot of people just don't really care that much about. Like I am... But I don't know. I don't pay attention to too much criticism, so I can't really put that out there because I'm not exactly sure what I could pull out of the air. I don't know. Maybe some people find things like the Turtles maybe a little too... I don't know. But I love them.
Yeah.
I love them.
Yeah.
I was listening to things like... Happy Together and stuff like that, and these are just really good songs.
Yeah, they really
they're
are.
So well written.
Yeah,
and okay, they're very lovey-dovey, and there's not exactly critical about anything like that. But it doesn't have to be.
No. So there you go.
Oh, the Beatles. There's a band that everybody hates.
Yeah. Okay. Maple McGee asks, what's your favorite album and or two favorites? How do you feel about heavy metal music? This is pretty easy. My two favorite albums of all time are Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' Damn the Torpedoes. That's probably my favorite album of all time. And my second favorite is probably the Black Crowes, the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion.
Both are Ace albums.
Yes.
Yeah,
those
good.
are probably my two favorite albums of all time. I'm not a fan of heavy metal music. I would certainly... I understand the appeal of it, especially if you're an angry teenager. I understand. Yeah.
It's funny. You could go either way. You can either go punk direction or heavy metal direction,
Yeah.
and it really depends on whether or not you care more about the musicianship or the lyrics.
Yeah.
And you go in either direction and whatnot, and they're both valid.
Yeah. My criticism of heavy metal guitar playing is that it's too technical. It's I don't want to offend any metal fans, but basically the reason that I can't. Okay, if you like technical music, that's cool. But the reason that I have a hard time getting into it is because the guitar playing and the musicianship is really rigid and technical, and it's played the same way, the same time, all the time, and it's very well planned out and very meticulous. And there's not, each part is like that. The drums are very right in time, almost very robotic, and there's not much room for feel in there. And I'm sure there's metal music out there that does have really good grooves to the drums and really melodic playing to the guitars. I just haven't found any metal music that I've connected with.
It depends on how you define metal, like how metal was defined in the early 70s. I really love the metal from the early 70s, like Black Sabbath, Deep Purple were considered metal, Led Zeppelin was considered metal.
Yeah.
Even Steppenwolf, they coined the term metal.
Yeah.
They sort of dropped off. They became more classic rock, and some of these other ones sort of shortly followed. Oh, Uriah Heep. I love Uriah Heep. Most of the other stuff, there's a couple of things here and there that I kind of like. But once again, it's more about, I don't know, I like a more organic general feel when it comes to music like that, which is why I get behind Deep Purple and Uriah Heep and stuff like that, because it's very organic in a lot of things, and organ driven, and I love the sound of a Hammond B3 and stuff like that. That's a really good selling point for me. But it's a personal opinion. I know lots of people who love metal, and I don't begrudge them anyway. I respect the technical ability of metalhead or of metal players and metalheads actually.
So what are your two favorite albums?
My two favorite albums of all time. Oh, geez. I'm probably gonna have to put Tom Petty's Wildflowers on that list.
That's a good one.
That's
I would say probably for me that's probably pretty close third.
Pretty close third. Yeah, it's a really, really good album. And another one, and it's probably mostly just because of the way it just affected me as a kid, and it's probably the Beatles' Revolver. That's another really good one. And if it wasn't that one, then I would probably go with NRBQ's Workshop, which apparently was really hard to find for a long time, but I've been listening to it since I was a kid. So, yeah.
Okay, and our last question is from Masson SR. I'm sorry if I...
Massancer? Massancer. We'll call him Massancer.
I think this is your question to read. So
how long does it take you guys to make these videos? Do you research about stuff, or are you just well versed in history of popular rock, metal music? Who is your favorite Beatle? And favorite guitar solo? Oh, okay.
The music discussion videos basically take us about 10 minutes to research. Pretty much I come over to John's, and we look
Plop on my couch.
Plop on the couch. We look for news articles, mostly on Alan Cross's website, alancross.ca.
He's a pretty good researcher, but we'll find him from other places too.
It's sort of a news aggregate site that links to other articles that's going on in the music industry. So we find an article that interests us, that's relevant to current events in the music industry and that we find interesting to talk about.
And it does help to be pretty well versed in things.
Yeah.
That's partly where some of the interest in the issues comes from.
Yeah.
Because we're sort of kind of on the outside, but somewhat involved with the music industry anyway. I know a lot of people who are really deep into it.
Yeah.
And when I think about some of these things that affect the musicians, I'm thinking of Friends and how it's affecting them.
Yeah.
So.
The album reviews are a little more planned out. When I review a new album, I literally walk around with it. I like to go for long walks, and so I'll listen to the album, upload it up onto my iPod, and I'll listen to the album and go for a walk with it. And I'll listen to it, and I won't take any notes or anything. I'll just sit back and listen to the album as if I'm listening to an album just to listen to it, without critical thinking, without listening to it critically. And then I'll listen to it again and make notes. And if you notice how I do the album reviews is I'll pick 5 songs that I think best represent the album. So it's usually the opening track, the title track, any singles that are from the album, and then the last song on the album, how the album closes out. And I like to do an overview of the whole album, go through it point by point. I know other reviewers like to more or less write an essay on the album. Like Anthony Fantano is really good at doing, the Needle Drop is really good at doing that. I approach it differently. Both approaches aren't necessarily right or wrong. It's just how we sort of go.
It's a different point of view.
Just different point of views. I'm not very good at writing essays, so I just write what I hear in the album and what I think about it.
I always sucked at essays too.
So what I'll do is I'll listen to it a few times, and then I'll listen to the track. The second listen is I'll pick the tracks that I want to talk about, and then I'll listen to it a few times, and then I'll go back and just listen to the tracks that I picked and actually write about those tracks and focus on those. So that's how I approach the album reviews. The classic reviews, those are probably the easiest videos to do because these are albums that I know inside and out, and they're just easy to talk about because this is material that I'm very familiar with. So that's how I approach each type of video that are on the channel. So yeah, we're pretty much well versed in rock and pop music.
We grew up with it, so yeah.
People, and it's not like people are interested in comic books, and they know a lot about comic books, movies. It's not like we're amazing at memorizing stuff. It's just what we're interested in. People who are into comic books know everything about comic books, but they don't necessarily know about other things. That's kind of how we are with music. It's just what we're interested in and what we like, and so that's what we pay attention to. That's what we spend our time on. That's just how it is.
That and Cars for me.
Who's your favorite Beatle?
George.
George, yeah.
But I've got a weird affinity to John too. I don't know. I relate to John a lot, but I think George is my favorite.
George definitely is, and Paul is pretty good too.
Some of the most cool, and we'll get to the next part of the question too. But some of the most famous solos in Beatles music were actually played by Paul.
Yeah, the guitar solo on Taxman, I think, was played by
Paul.
But as far as solo careers go, I think George has the most interesting. He put out the most interesting music, but they were all really good at doing their own thing. They all kind of did their own thing when they went solo. George was really introspective.
I don't want to ignore Ringo either.
No, so. George was really introspective in and expressing how he felt as a human being. John was really good at expressing his political points of view. As well as his personal points of view in some of his later solo music.
There's kind of an overlap there, too.
Yeah. Paul was really good at putting together a really well-crafted pop song. I mean, if you listen to Band on the Run, that's a really well put together pop song. And Ringo, his solo career was, he found a bit of a niche in doing like show tunes, and he was really good at being a showman. He was really good at he sort of went a little bit like Frank Sinatra or something in a solo career.
Sort of, but with a little bit more rock and roll than that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So they all kind of had their merits. And I've said it before, but I think Ringo is a really underrated drummer. And people tend to dismiss his contributions to the band, but I think no, he didn't write very many songs, but without his drumming, they wouldn't sound like the Beatles. They would be a completely different band.
Here's a neat way to look at Ringo's solo career. What Ringo was doing throughout the 70s is probably very much what John Lennon wanted to do in the 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. And the last is, what's your favorite guitar solo?
Probably Eric Clapton's In the Middle of Crossroads. A lot of people say that, but it's perfection.
Yeah.
And it's perfection without being technically perfect. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's very close to being technically perfect, but there's so much feeling in that. Or anything Peter Green did with the early incarnation of Fleetwood Mac, which is also another underrated.
Yeah. My favorite guitar solo.
Sorry.
I mean, my favorite guitar player is Mike Campbell. He's had some really good solos. The solo in Out in the Cold is really good.
I love that. I did air guitar to that when I was a kid. A lot.
He had a really good solo in the song Too Much Ain't Enough.
Yes, he did. I love that.
The
whole guitar part in that is really cool.
Just rips right through the song, and I heard that when they were recording that song, I read it somewhere that they were recording the song and they needed a solo, so Mike Campbell just said, okay, I'll play a solo, and he picked up a guitar and he just played what's on the record, and Tom Petty, I think, said everyone's jaw was on the floor when he just did it. And without practicing, without working out the part in advance, he just did it. So I think that's probably is maybe not the greatest solo of all time, but I think knowing that story behind the solo and him being able to improvise such not only a good guitar solo, but a guitar solo that fits the song. That's probably my favorite guitar solo is in Too Much Ain't Enough.
I think I really like when Mike Campbell did what's that Bird song? Feel a whole lot better when they did that one. He sort of took Roger McGuinn's part and sort of finessed it a bit.
Yeah.
And I can't even hear the guitar solo another way. I can play that solo. It's one of the only solos I can actually play as a guitar. I'm more of a rhythm player, but I can play that solo.
Yeah.
And it's why change it?
Yeah.
There's no other notes to go to.
Yeah.
It's just so perfect for the song. To deviate is almost a sin.
Yeah.
And it's just, unless you can do it well, I'm not going to say don't. I'm just going to say I can't figure out how.
Yeah, well, that's why Mike Campbell is my favorite guitar player, because he can very much just rip on the guitar. He's up there with the best of them. I mean, he's like he can do Jimmy Page stuff, he can do whatever on the guitar. But then he goes and does a solo like in the song Down South, which is on a 12-string, and the solo is like 3 or 4 notes. But it fits the song perfectly. That's why he's my favorite guitar player, because he doesn't show off. He chooses solos that fit the song the best. And that's why I respect him so much, because he doesn't show off. He does what's right for the song.
There's one on here too. Jeff Beck. And speaking of minimalist solos, there's a song called Jeff's Blues. No, wait, I think it's actually the Nazar Blue, which is,
Yeah.
Anyway, and it's just he just hits one note at one point in the solo, and he holds it for like maybe 16 bars even.
Yeah.
And it's just the sustain of a Les Paul, which
Yeah.
is legendary, partly because of him. And he's just holding it, and then he bends it, and then he's back up.
And that's it.
And that's it.
But it's perfect.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are our favorite guitar solos.
Yeah.
Those are all the questions that you guys asked of us. We want to thank you for asking those questions. Again, thank you for getting us to 1,000 subscribers. I know this video is a little long. Hopefully you stuck around for the end. Thank you once again. I don't know what else to say other than thank you. And that's it. Be sure to check us. You can check us out on Twitter and Facebook. Follow John on Twitter at FunkyDutch. Polyphonicpress.com. All the links are in the description. And that's about it. I'm Jeremy Boyd.
I'm John Van Dyke.
Take it easy.